strip your product down, strip your service down, do less, charge more, you will be happier, the business will flourish, and your clients will be happier.
Our next guest has been dubbed the young Aussie millionaire that didn't finish uni.
Jack Delosa turned it all around.
Jack's impressive resume recently landed him a chance to spend 6 days schmoozing with Sir Richard Branson on his private Caribbean island.
Welcome to the podcast. So good to have you.
Very good to be here, mate. Thank you for having me.
Apple, we don't think of that as Tim Cook's company. We think of that as Steve Jobs' company, or Virgin is Richard Branson, or Tesla is Elon Musk. What are your thoughts on personal brand? How important is that going to be?
You know, you don't need to be Tony Robbins to build a personal brand.
Yeah.
You just need to be you. I think that the key things that a CEO needs to be as good as possible at are marketing, sales, and delivery. If I was to summarize a CEO's job in one word, it's that's my job as a business owner, is to roll the dice, do everything I can proactively to make it work.
So what you're saying is ego and you're a control freak. At what stage am I hiring a CEO, replacing myself as the business leadership?
My personal view has changed on this.
Jack, welcome to the podcast. So good to have you.
Very good to be here, mate. Thank you for having me.
Man, the reason I wanted to have you on is, I've just been following your trajectory over the years and it's just been so impressive. I remember attending Unconvention. I remember always walking away inspired, which is really why I wanted to have you on. For those who may not know you, what would be the 2-sentence intro that you'd introduce yourself to someone on the street who asked who you are?
Well, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm an investor. These days, the kind of centre of my world is a business called the Entourage. We're Australia's largest growth agency. And then around that, I've got a group of companies, and I also invest in high growth private companies that I think, have a bit of growth potential that I can help them realise.
So you've been instrumental in the growth of a lot of Australian businesses, taking them from 6 figures to 7, 7 to 8 and beyond. I'd love to know, what are some of the commonalities of high growth businesses that you've seen? What are the things that really move the needle when taking someone from one kind of income level or revenue level to another?
I think the main thing is great entrepreneurs are very good at identifying signal through noise. And so in any given business, there's 1,000 things that one can do. Founder comes into the office, first thing they do is they open their email inbox.
Yeah.
And your email inbox is a list of other people's priorities for you.
Yeah.
And so when your day is dictated by your email inbox, you're literally putting other people's to-do lists ahead of your own.
Yes.
The great entrepreneurs are really good at identifying what are the core things that actually move the needle and how do I create as much space as possible so I can dedicate as much time to the things that are going to make the greatest amount of impact. Just about every business thinks they have a cash problem. They don't. They have an attention allocation problem. And so there are really 3 or 4 things that move the needle in business: generating leads, making sales, delivering well to ensure that people come back. And so you're either doing one of those 3 things or you're recruiting people to do those 3 things. And that's pretty much it. And so if you can maximize the time that you spend on revenue generating activities, maximize the time you spend on winning and keeping and retaining customers, then eventually, even if your business model isn't sound to begin with, eventually you will find one and it will scale because you're being proactive in looking at the things that make the difference.
Yes, that's kind of the 80-20 rule, right? So
Exactly.
pretty much 80% of the stuff we're doing makes no difference, right? Doesn't really move the needle. It's the 20% stuff. And I haven't heard that refined on itself, so where you can apply the 80-20 rule to itself and it becomes the 64-4 rule. The 4% of things give you 64% of the results. And
100%.
And that's absolutely been my experience. And when I look at some of the things that actually were big needle movers in my business, it's a few little moves that I did maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago, a year ago, whatever, that made all the difference. So it's just been such a great filter to really help me prioritize my time, and
100%.
it makes a huge difference.
The question I'm always asking myself, Allan, is this. What's the number one challenge in this business right now that, if solved, would make the biggest difference? And the reason why that is the most powerful question you can ask in business is all business is a game of growing from constraint to constraint. Yeah. So you need to build a leadership team. You unlock that constraint and you go to the next one. And so what I encourage every business owner to do is ask themselves that question every single day. And then you want to focus on any given constraint until it is solved, until it is fixed, whether that's 2 months, 3 months, 6 months. Just do 1 or 2 key initiatives at a time until they are unlocked, and then move on to the next one. If I was to summarize a CEO's job in one word, it's prioritization.
Yeah.
And so there are 1,000 things you can get done today, but there's one thing that's going to move the needle than the other 999 combined.
Yeah.
And if you don't know what that one thing is, then you're the constraint. Your ignorance is the constraint.
Yeah.
And so I think the number one skill of the entrepreneur is to be able to look at your business from a 30,000 foot view, and then you as the business owner micromanage that. That's how I operate in my businesses. I micromanage the number one constraint at any given time. And so it really is that the fundamental paradigm shift is stop operating reactively and take control of your time, because how you spend your time is how you spend your life.
Yeah. 100% agreed. The really excellent CEOs that I find are like, they just look at what is the actual constraint and let's fix that, whether they come from that area or not. And often it's best if they're more of a generalist to some extent, unless the business is kind of like majorly got a blockage in one specific area. But that's rarely ever the case for a long period of time, or shouldn't be.
100%. And I've made that mistake a couple of times. I think the key things that a CEO needs to be as good as possible at: marketing, sales, and delivery. So I think if a CEO can be good at winning customers and pleasing customers, they're going to be pretty good.
Yeah, I agree. Apple, we don't think of that as Tim Cook's company. We think of that as Steve Jobs' company, or Virgin is Richard Branson, or Tesla is Elon Musk. What are your thoughts on personal brand? How important is that going to be?
It's a huge accelerator and it's a huge advantage. People connect with people more than they do with businesses. Today, what people value is authenticity. And so, you don't need to be Tony Robbins to build a personal brand.
Yeah.
You just need to be you. And often it's the very imperfections that either prevent somebody from getting started on the personal brand journey, or it's the very imperfections or insecurities that are preventing them from stepping into it and stepping up from it. Those imperfections, those insecurities is what your audience is going to connect most with.
And I think, now with AI, with automation, it used to be production, it used to be the product or the service or whatever that was the big differentiator. Now more and more that's getting commoditized. It's more or less the same across providers. And the story, the personal brand, all of these things are what really differentiates you. At the end of the day, and perceived value is value. That's something that's not well understood. Now a lot of these e-commerce startups are taking you behind the scenes, and they take you on that journey with you, and it makes you feel so much more invested than if it was just a faceless brand that you saw on the shelf.
I could not agree more with everything you just said. Brand is the feelings that your customers and your market associate with your business.
Yep.
And that comes from a range of things. It comes from the story and the narrative and the positioning of your brand. But most importantly, it comes from every single touch point in my experience with your brand. And so brand isn't what you say it is. Brand is how your customers experience your business, and therefore what they say it is.
Yeah.
The other thing that you said, which is so profound, is a lot of the time people think making a product better is about changing the intrinsic features of the product.
Yeah.
One of the fastest and most effective ways for business owners to increase profit is to increase their price. You didn't spend any more time doing anything else. You didn't spend any more money doing anything else. You don't have more customers. You didn't do anything other than implement a price increase, and you increase the profitability of the business by 50%, right? And so the reason why increasing price is such a impactful profit driver is, as business owners, we're really good at undercharging because of our own sense of imposter syndrome. And so often when we're having this conversation with business owners, they say, okay, great. What should I add to the product to make it worth that?
Yeah.
And what they don't realize they're doing is when you add to your product, you're probably adding complexity, confusion, and more effort from your customer or client to consume your product. And so when business owners think about products and services, we think more is better. And I call that negative value. You're putting more stuff on it, and that is increasing either the time it takes your client, your customer to interact with you, or the effort required that they need to exert to interact with you. And so you've actually created negative value. And so a lot of the times the unlock for a business owner is strip your product down, strip your service down, do less, and charge more. You will be happier, the business will flourish, and your clients will be happier.
I've got a few books in the pipeline, but a pricing book is definitely one of them.
Dude, I'm your first reader.
It is such a lever. It is such a massive lever because price is much more than just supply and demand. Price is a signal, right? But also how price is used as an anchor. Having that super high priced product, it makes your normal price products look pretty reasonable, right?
Yeah, but that's a very important point as well, which is sometimes just having a significantly more expensive option gives a contrast price to the price of your, let's say, your core product or service. And so more people end up buying your core product or service simply because you had a more expensive option. That is a very effectual lever.
And there's a demographic that will always just buy the best version of what you've got. So, and they tend to be often the best customers and the most profitable customers as well. Price will also dictate the quality of customer that you have. And, you know, high price, low volume is one strategy. Low price, high volume is another strategy. You want to be very deliberate about that. And probably the worst place to be is that middle, you know?
Yes, 100%. And I see this a lot, particularly with business owners that, let's say, are in their first kind of 10 years, is they're pricing low because they want to be accessible to everybody. And so the conversation I have there is, when you're undercharging, you're not being generous, you're being selfish. And in so doing, you're exhausting yourself, you're exhausting your team, and you're destroying any margin that you might have, which inhibits your ability to deliver well to the end client. And so everybody loses because one person wasn't bold enough to make the necessary decision. Profit is not an option. You make a profit or you're gone. You make a profit or everyone in your team is out of a job. And so if you listen to this podcast right now, if all you do is increase your price, and I'm not, like it has to be more than 10%. I'm talking like 20%, 40%. If that's all you do, it will change your business and the lives of everybody in it and around it forever.
So my view is that business is one of the most profound personal development tools there is. It'll take your personality traits, it'll magnify them 10x, right? So what are the things that kind of keep people stuck at their level, you know, at 6 figures, at 7 figures, at 8 figures? Because I often see it requires you to kind of shed your old personality and have a real mindset shift to move from one tier to another. What are those kind of barriers? And then what's stopping people from breaking through at each level?
Self-identity. You'll never make $1 more than you think you're worth. And what prevents us from elevating self-identity is, at a fundamental level, the number one thing that prevents human beings from achieving their goals is human beings avoid hard. When something is difficult or challenging, we are wired to avoid it. If you can train yourself to seek out what is the most challenging thing that I'm avoiding and do that consistently, you'll be in the top 0.1%. And then if you can train that as a muscle and part of your identity, then funnily enough, doing hard things actually becomes easy because you trained your brain that you're comfortable and okay when you do them. And so counterintuitively, the more we train ourselves to lean into what's difficult, the better we get at it and the less willpower we chew up in doing it. And so what keeps most people stuck is, I am comfortable at the level that I am at. And I say I want to go to the next level, but there are things that I am required to do in order to get there. They feel uncomfortable and I'm procrastinating against doing them.
And I find a lot of people sort of at that technician level, often maybe they hit a ceiling at around $1 million in revenue or whatever. They're essentially the centerpiece. They're the genius in the business, and everyone is kind of assisting them to some extent. And they'll almost never break through that ceiling, or if they do, they'll only do it for a short period of time and plateau until they figure out that, hey, I need to hire people that are smarter than me. I need to let go of some of the reins, so that breaking through from 6 to 7 figures really requires a people strategy there.
100%. You get to a point in business where doing everything yourself becomes really expensive.
Yeah.
Most people think doing everything themselves saves money.
Yeah.
Whereas when you do everything yourself, you waste a lot of time, and time well spent is significantly more valuable than money.
Yeah.
And so the identity shift is from me to we. How much you get done in a day will determine the business's output to a large extent. And so there's no leverage there. Business needs 1 unit of output. You need to put in 1 unit of input. It's 1-to-1, no leverage. Where you want to build to is where it's 1 unit of input from you and 1,000 units of output pop out of the machine. Because you've built a team within an ecosystem and within a structure, and everybody has direction, so we're all heading in the same direction, where you're able to direct and conduct, and the team produce the majority of the output. And so you build the team, and the team builds the business.
Yeah.
A really important point here that I didn't understand for a long time, and I still speak to a lot of business owners who are early on in their journey that don't fully appreciate, is all growth is sales and marketing led. You can have the best product in the world, but if people don't know about it, they can't buy it.
Yeah.
And so what gets you to 6 figures is having a decent product and a service. What gets you to 7 figures is being more proactive with customer acquisition. And you've got more customers, but you're the one that's still holding it all together. And so you're kind of bursting at the seams a little bit. But the paradigm shift is you're no longer looking for people who are 60% as good as you. You're looking for people who are 160% better. And the minute you put somebody senior and experienced in either marketing or sales will be one of the biggest inflection points you ever experience in business. And guess what? You can still spend 10% of your time there, but you'll spend 10% directing and guiding them to maximize their 100%.
What are your thoughts around recruiting people who've got potential, maybe diamonds in the rough, versus someone who's been there, done it, executed on it, and so on?
I look for people who have both. And so they have to demonstrate exceptional ability already. They have to be brilliant already. Why? Because I don't have time to make them good. I don't have most of the skills that I employ people for. Nor do I have the time, nor do I have the desire to train them on it. And so if I'm recruiting you, I want you to be brilliant already.
Yeah.
To the potential piece, I look for people who are exceptional and on the up.
So you've talked about breaking through the 1 to 3 million barrier. Above that, how do we break through 10 million and beyond? What are the key things there?
And so from 3 to 10, just kind of view what I'm about to say is there's 3 levels, right? The first level is that the entrepreneur, the business owner, is just stuck in product development and delivery. So they're not yet focused on marketing and sales. They're just stuck in delivery. And I'd say 80 to 90% of business owners are there. Level 2 is you're delivering well, but you're coupling that with a growth orientation and you're putting an emphasis on winning new customers, right? When you get to about 3-5 million, you then need to go to level 3, which is I'm delivering well, I'm winning new customers, but I'm also extending the lifetime value of my existing customers so that every customer is worth more. And so this might be extending the experience of the product or service. It might be we now have a pretty significant customer or client base, past and present, and we've given them a solution. That solution has helped them achieve an outcome. They've now got new problems. What products or services can we sell to their new problems? It can be charging more and then upsells and cross-sells, which really fits into that kind of second bucket of offering them more stuff. I need to be winning new customers through effective marketing and sales that is also operating under the leadership of an executive or manager that heads up that. I now need to obsess about lifetime value? How do I extend the lifetime value of my existing customers? And if you want to do all of those three things, you need to be good at having leaders in place to manage those three things.
Yeah. I often talk about marketing and business metrics, and really, to me, the only two that really matter, all the other metrics are kind of
CAC to LTV?
CAC and LTV, that's it. Customer acquisition cost and lifetime value. And by far, lifetime value is the most powerful one, because if we can take someone from being worth 10,000 to the business to being 15,000 to the business or 20,000 to the business or whatever, that instantly improves all of our metrics. In fact, if you can increase your LTV, you can increase your CAC, your cost of customer acquisition. And that becomes a barrier to other kind of cowboys in the industry who just can't afford that kind of cost of customer acquisition.
100%. 100%. Yeah, people, it comes back to the whole vanity metrics thing, right? Like a lot of people try and minimize cost per lead, for example. I don't even really look at cost per lead. Well, I look at CAC a lot. I want to know what my ratios are to acquire a customer relative to LTV, and if I can get my LTV up and therefore I can put my CAC up, and that enables me to win more customers or better customers or take share from competitors, then spending more on CAC in that instance is actually, as you say, can be a positive.
Yeah. At what stage is product to market fit the sort of defining characteristic of what you need to get right? It's going to be a blocker to future growth. How do I know if I've got product to market fit?
It's more about how do you know if you don't. And so if marketing falls on deaf ears, if sales conversions are too low, if people aren't buying, if people aren't staying, if people aren't referring, if people aren't repeating, then chances are there's an imperfect product to market fit that can be honed. And so to come back to your first question, when is it most important? It's probably most important in the beginning because it's all that you've got, but it continues to be increasingly important because you don't want to get to 10 or 20 million and then lose your product to market fit because the consumer changed and your business didn't. Then you're in big trouble. And so you have to have it from the beginning to even get to 6 or 7 figures. You need product to market fit. And so that's where it'll be like the focal point. And then it continues to become increasingly important the larger you grow.
And that's going to dictate how much you can charge. And often I like to kind of just slightly tweak that. It's not necessarily even a product market fit, because often you'll find there'll be someone selling the exact same product who's crushing and someone else who's just struggling. It's often a message to market fit. So where the messaging, the positioning of the product, all of that is key. So many times we've taken the same product for the same market, but we've tweaked the messaging and suddenly, boom, we've got a winning campaign or a winning offer.
100%. I would say that's significantly more common than needing to change the product.
Yeah. Very rare that the core product needs complete overhaul. Does happen, but it's pretty rare.
Yeah.
At what stage am I hiring a CEO, replacing myself as the business leadership?
My personal view has changed on this. And one of the mistakes I needed to remind myself a couple of years ago was there's a difference between being operational and making the decisions. But I delegated because I didn't want to be operational. But the business and everybody in it would have benefited if I continued to make the strategic and sometimes operational and tactical decisions.
Yeah.
And so how I operate today is I am the CEO of my group of companies, and I do have a very high kind of throughput on a weekly basis. I'm not operational. I'm making the decisions and I'm guiding and I'm leading and I'm problem solving, but everything is delegated. As we spoke about when we started, the question I'm always asking myself is, what's the biggest challenge in this business right now that if solved would make the biggest difference? I jump in, I obsess about that, I micromanage that. But if a business is that conceptual assembly line that we spoke about and there's somebody managing each stage of the assembly line, everything else is being managed and being run without me, and by definition is performing better than the thing that I'm focusing on. And so I want to free myself up so that A, I can work on the most important problem at any given time, and I often do that in conjunction with the leader of that particular function. I want to free myself up so that I can focus on vision and direction and people development and recruitment. I want to free myself up so that I can focus on big strategic moves. What that means is I'm closer to the business than I was, let's say, I'm the one making the high-level decisions and I'm more equipped to make them better, as opposed to delegating high-level decisions that are going to impact the business for 5 to 10 years.
Yeah. Over decades, you've seen the inside of so many different types of businesses. Grass is always greener on the other side. But, if you were starting fresh, waving a wand, what type of business would you start now? I mean, we've both seen the inside of many businesses, and some of them I'm like, damn, this is a real hard business to run. I'd never want to run a business like this. And others I'm like, wow, these guys are printing money. And so what type of business would you start if we were starting from scratch?
To answer the question I think you're asking is, right now I would start a business that was in AI. So that's the business that I would choose from a timing and a market growth and future potential standpoint.
Yeah.
The truth for me personally is the business that I would start is the business that I have.
Yeah.
Because I love it and it's who I am. There's such a deep connection there.
Yeah.
And that's a huge strength. Sometimes it can be a weakness, obviously. But, we hit some really rough days in 2016. We were losing about $400,000 a month and 3 months away from losing $800,000 a month. But there was a deep voice inside of me that said, I'm going to choose to create a different reality to that. I'm going to choose to fight. And fight I did, and that was the hardest 3 to 4 years of my entire life. And, like all of us, I haven't had the easiest trot through life. That was probably the hardest period. And from a personal perspective, I would often ask myself, what else do I want to go away and do? And the answer was nothing.
Yeah.
All I want to do is what I'm doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's the kind of personal answer is, if I was to start any business, it would be the business that I'm in right now. If I was looking at from a purely entrepreneurial commercial lens and it was objective and it wasn't necessarily about me, I think clearly the growth sector over the next 5, 10, 20 years is going to be AI.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, to me, I look at where can I have such a big moat, right? And to me, it's very hard to get past solid intellectual property assets where you've got a piece of intellectual property, maybe it's protected by a trademark, or maybe even if it's not protected by a trademark, it's like you're known for that thing and that thing is associated with you. I think that's super, super powerful. And whenever I think about this, I think about, have you ever seen those little yellow smiley faces?
Yeah.
They're on stickers, they're on mugs, on T-shirts or whatever.
Yeah.
There's a company that owns the trademark to that. They make $500 million a year licensing yellow smiley faces, which look like
crazy,
it took someone 10 minutes to put together.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Love it. Jack, thank you so much. You've been
this is great, man.
Really,
I knew this was going to be a good discussion.
Yeah. Is there anything I haven't asked you that I should have asked you?
No, mate, not at all. If anyone wants to kind of follow along on the journey, the best place to keep up with me is probably on Instagram. On Instagram, I'm just Jack Delosa. Delosa being Delosa.
Perfect. I love your content and I'll continue to follow you. And thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, mate. Appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to the Lean Marketing Podcast. This podcast is sponsored by the Lean Marketing Accelerator. Want to take control of your marketing and see real results? With the Accelerator, you get proven strategies, tools, and personalized support to scale your business. Visit leanmarketing.com/accelerator to learn how we can help you get bigger results with less marketing. And if you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review or share it with someone who would find it helpful. See you next time.